Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle, the show that brings you the libertarian perspective on current events. I'm joined, as I am every week, by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, who teaches economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to be back with you and our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, Richard, you were with FFF from the very beginning. 1989, you were vice president of academic affairs for the Future of Freedom Foundation before you went on to bigger and more glorious things in life. And so you know what our perspective has been from the very beginning. From the very start, we had this philosophy of we don't compromise. And you and I had talked about this when we were first getting this foundation going, about the importance of principles in the dissemination of ideas on liberty and what we were trying to accomplish. And so I thought what we ought to do is have a series of shows here on Libertarian Angle that focus on the burning issues of the day and put them in the context of libertarian principles and explain to people why these principles are so important. I mean, obviously, that when we're faced with particular crises or chaos within government programs, you have two ways to go. You can devote your life to trying to come up with a good reform package on how to make the system better, more efficient, less costly, or you can do what you and I have been doing since the very beginning, and that is focusing on the principles of liberty with the idea of achieving a free society, and then calling for the abolition of the program. And we've been criticized, as you know, over the years here at FFF for being too uncompromising, that, hey, you guys ought to be taking a little bit smaller bite of the apple. More people would be attracted to what you're doing. And they're missing the boat. I mean, what we've always been interested in as libertarians is the achievement of a free society, and we obviously believe that that's achievable. I mean, a lot of people have just lost hope and say, oh, the federal government's too big and it's too powerful. Not so. I mean, there's a reason why people publish op-eds and write books, and that's because not only just to speak to the ages, but also with the idea that that can influence a shift in society in the near term. So I thought we'd start out with one topic that's obviously one of the burning issues of the day, and that's healthcare. And we've got this gigantic healthcare crisis. We've had Obamacare for some 7 years now, and for 7 years the Republicans and the conservatives have been talking about abolishing Obamacare. They've made it their mantra, and then finally here they are with control of Congress, control of the executive branch of the government, where if they wanted to get it done, I mean, here was their chance to repeal Obamacare. But as I've been arguing for 7 years, for one thing, I never thought they would do it because Republicans and conservatives always compromise and abandon their principles. But as I've been pointing out, this repealing Obamacare wasn't going to accomplish anything because you've got a healthcare crisis in place that precipitated Obamacare. I mean, that's why Obamacare was enacted, because there was a healthcare crisis. If you get rid of Obamacare, you're still going to have that crisis. And so here is your classic example of where whatever you do isn't going to work. It's going to be a reform package of really a socialist interventionist program. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the core of the problem is Medicare and Medicaid. You've got these two socialist programs that succeeded in destroying what is arguably the finest healthcare system in history. And the assumption among conservatives and Republicans, liberals and progressives is that those two programs are a permanent feature of American life, that you can't touch those. And so then everything revolves around, well, how do you fix it? How do you improve it? How do you do this and how do you do that? Well, as you and I know, that as long as you've got this massive intervention of these two socialistic programs, you're always going to have a crisis. You're always going to have chaos. And so if you really want a dynamic, healthy, prospering healthcare system, you have to pull the weed out by its root. That reform is going to accomplish nothing. In fact, arguably any type of reform measure of socialism or interventionism only makes the situation worse. Now, of course, that's just one part of the equation. You've got the other part of occupational licensure that limits the supply of medical personnel. You've got massive insurance regulation. You've got that idiotic tax regulation that encourages employers to have health insurance for their employees. So what started out as one of the greatest healthcare systems in history has actually been destroyed. And the assumption is that, the only solution now is to move to single payer, which is a full-fledged socialist system where the government's providing health care for everyone, or a free society in which we have a free market in healthcare, which necessarily involves a dismantling, an abolition, a repeal of these interventions, including Medicare and Medicaid and occupational licensure and regulation and the like. What do you think?
Well, I think that the problem originates from a variety of elements. The most important one is that now for well over a century, the presumption is that government has functions, duties, and responsibilities beyond that of merely protecting the citizenry's life, liberty, and honestly acquired property, and the fulfillment and enforcement of contracts, and so on and so forth. There has emerged this notion, well over 100 years now, really, that the government has a responsibility to provide various types of social safety nets, that the government has to provide not just the security of your life and property through what has become known as negative freedom or negative rights, but through this positive element of the state being responsible to secure and provide certain positive desires or needs of the populace, which of course requires the government to regulate and to tax. That's the broad philosophical issue. That is the basic reason why it is so difficult in the ideological sense of overturning this. Because when anyone has even hinted at this idea of the issue, should government be involved in healthcare? Is this a legitimate function, duty, and responsibility for the federal government? The response by the critics, left, right, and center, is that, but wait a second. If government doesn't provide this, you're leaving people to have to make their own decisions, their own choices, their own judgments, their own exchanges in the marketplace. Surely there are certain things that are so essential to human life that they can't be left to the uncertainties and the changing currents of a free market. There have to be these social safety nets. Now that's the broadest philosophical dilemma we have. That has so permeated the thinking of American, and in fact, let's be honest, global society. No country anywhere is contemplating the ending of whatever their version of government involvement in healthcare. But the other element in this is sort of a practical institutional one, is that once these types of systems are set up, it generates both psychological and economic and political spider's webs of interdependency that is very difficult to break. People have come to take it for granted that Medicare and Medicaid are going to cover a wide variety of their medical and health-related expenses. That's a psychological given now among people, unfortunately. Then there's the economic element that, as you mentioned, since World War II, employers have been increasingly responsible to provide all or a good part of their employees' health care. Well, they do so, but the fact is that the companies that do this, the large corporations, also get a huge tax write-off because this is part of their cost of doing business. This influences their bottom line as well. So there's an economic incentive for many corporations not to want to see the end of this, precisely because it serves them for their fiscal tax purposes. There's then also the fact is that how many medical institutions, pharmaceutical companies, in spite of the regulations and the semi-price controls that are imposed upon them, have become dependent and reliant upon the stream of government revenues from Medicare and Medicaid and now Obamacare. And how many people are employed in these sectors of the economy whose incomes, salaries are dependent upon the streams of government money that go to their employers through these government funded welfare, medical programs. All of this has created this huge spider's web of both political, ideological, and economic interdependency of keeping the system going. And that is the reason why Republicans and conservatives, even if you occasionally in a private conversation, and I have once in a while, do you really think this is the role of government? Do you really think this is working? Don't you think it would be better to abolish the whole thing? They say, yes, of course it would be. But I won't get elected. They'll throw me out as an insensitive, heartless rascal. Why, the other guy would get in, and we know he'd be worse than me, however much I have to hold my nose in the things I vote for. So all of this creates this institutional climate that makes it so difficult. But even that may be the case, Jacob. It doesn't change the fact that we need to ask those fundamental questions, because the system is coming to face various crises, certainly the financial ones, the money to fund all of this, and certainly as the population ages. We have to ask the fundamental question, going back to those founding principles of the country. Is this a duty and responsibility of the government, as expressed philosophically in the Declaration of Independence and structurally in the original Constitution? And beyond that, we have to then complement that with saying that if we are concerned about quality health care, medical availability, reasonably priced medical insurance, can we rely upon the government to do this? Or can we not imagine that as in all other aspects in which freedom still prevails? The market does its job, create a profit opportunity, and entrepreneurs, regardless of the sector of the economy, pharmaceutical, medical, healthcare, insurance, will be set loose to apply their innovative creativity to ask the question, how can I provide this service better, less expensively, improved, so I can gain the customer's business instead of my rivals? Do we not take this for granted with cell phones? Do we not take this for granted with what we now have seen from the old-fashioned 1950s television to the flat-screen, high-definition television of today, all of which has seen better, larger quantities available to serve more people's needs for cell phones and televisions, improved quality, and in real inflation-adjusted terms, dramatically lower prices than, let's say, 40 or 50 years ago. We expect this in the clothing, better quality, more wrinkle-resistant, more durable, et cetera, et cetera. Just look at the computer through which we're doing this show today, Jacob. This is an innovation that has improved in quality. The capacity of us being able to do a show like this that then shows globally on various internet video providers. This is what the market does. It gives us more products, better products, less expensive products. That is what we have to make people think. If we take it for granted in areas of our life, X, Y, and Z, let us now do a little mental exercise. What if we now freed the medical industry and the healthcare industry and the insurance industry from these tethers, these restraints that the government imposes through regulations, controls, and fiscal burdens? Why would we not expect that in a reasonable amount of time, right? Nothing changes in a day per se, particularly when you're overcoming all of the hampering and destruction the government programs have done. But why would we not expect that the healthcare and the medical insurance industry would not transformatively see the same improvements, innovations, and lower costs over time as we expect in these other sectors of the economy? Think outside the box. Imagine government wasn't doing it, but it was like cell phones or televisions or computers. That would be, again, another version of the miracle of the market, but applied to healthcare and medical insurance.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you ask that critically important question. I think it's a question that Americans should be discussing, debating, mulling over, contemplating. What is the role of government? What is the legitimate role of government in a free society? And then the flip side of that question is, what does it mean to be free? And then perhaps the most important question in this context, Richard, is how bad do you want to be free? And I think every American ought to be asking himself that question. I mean, some Americans will say, well, look, I don't care about being free. I mean, they may concede that a free society is one that we libertarians argue is one where you decide what to do with your own money, where government's not forcing you to do anything with your money. You're not forced to take care of your parents with Social Security or the seniors. You're not forced to take care of them with Medicare and Medicaid. You're not forced to donate your money to any organization. That you're free to keep everything you earn. I mean, that's one of the essential prerequisites of a free society, as we libertarians have long maintained. And so somebody might say, well, Jacob, I don't care about being free. I want the government to take care of me. I want the government to watch over me, to force me to be good and caring, to take other people's money and give it to me, or to subsidize my health care. All right. I mean, that person's made a conscientious decision. He's thought it over, and freedom's not important to him. But for people like you and me, Richard, I mean, we want to know what it's like to be in a free society. We have that idea that it's still possible to achieve a free society through the power of ideas. Well, once a person decides that you know what, in the one life that I was given, I want to know what it's like to be free. Throughout history, most people have not lived lives of freedom. Now, the plight of the American people is aggravated by the fact that they think they're free. I mean, they embody Goethe's saying of none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. But once people achieve this breakthrough, and that's the breakthrough that I achieved when I was in my late 20s, I realized all the indoctrination that, I live in a free country and we have a free enterprise system and stuff was just a lie that had been indoctrinated in me, primarily in the public school system. And I realized that the welfare state way of life, or what you described as government taking care of people, is not freedom at all. It's not genuine freedom in the libertarian sense. A genuinely free society is where government is not taking care of anyone, and government is not forcing charity on anyone. Now, and so that's the principle that we're fighting for here at FFF. We want a free society, and we believe a free society is achievable, and a necessary prerequisite, albeit not sufficient prerequisite, is a free market healthcare system. Now, as you point out, Richard, once people get dependent on this system, it makes our job that much more difficult, because a person might say, well, gosh, Jacob, I want a free society, but now I'm dependent on this. I have a pre-existing condition. If you remove Obamacare, I will have to bear the expenses of my pre-existing condition. Well, here's where the morality comes in. Is that, where's the morality in forcing someone else to fund the treatment of your pre-existing condition? But secondly, Richard, the dependency on these kind of systems is they destroy people's faith in freedom and free people. There was a period of time when I think I was in my 40s or 50s where I didn't have health insurance, and I would walk into doctors' offices and they would say, "What's your insurance?" And I said, "I don't have any." They would always give me a discount. I mean, they understood that, hey, I was in a bad situation and I didn't have health insurance. They would give me a discount. And I have absolutely no doubt that that's what would happen. If you got rid of Medicare and Medicaid and Obamacare today, the healthcare industry, the doctors, the hospitals, they would work with people that have pre-existing conditions that cannot get healthcare insurance. But you've got to have that faith in other people, in a free people, that's what would happen. I mean, we saw this before Medicare and Medicaid came into existence. The medical profession, doctors would treat the poor for free. Hospitals would handle for free because they were keeping most of what they earned. The income tax level had not gotten that high, and they felt it as a moral duty to subsidize the needs of the poor or the needy. And that's exactly what would happen if you got rid of this whole apparatus. Is that you'd have a healthy, dynamic healthcare system, and doctors would be making more money, and which would then enable them to subsidize the needs of those who who need the help. And so that's the other destructive part of this socialist system. It destroys people's faith in freedom and free people and free markets.
Yeah, the major problem in making people understand this is that there has gone down what is referred to as an Orwellian memory hole. The world of medical care before all of these government programs came in. The fact is, it's going to sound shocking to perhaps some viewers or listeners, but as late as the 1920s, and in fact into the 1930s, there were no such government programs for medical insurance or health care. The private sector did this. Now, were there people who, because of financial circumstances, found it difficult to provide their own medical care for themselves or their family? Yes. And that's why throughout the United States, there was this huge network of charity hospitals, many of them religious-based, meant precisely to help cover the expenses of those who could not fully cover the costs of the medical treatment for themselves and their families on their own. There was the fact that doctors performed what you were just referring to. In the jargon of the economists, it's called price discrimination. You subdivide the demand for your product, and you charge some people who more intensely want it and have the ability to pay it a higher price than others. Now, a version of that was that doctors on their own would charge some of their more financially comfortable patients a bit more, and they would use part of the revenues generated from those wealthier patients to help defray the expenses of giving medical care and support and medical and pharmaceuticals that they would give them in the doctor's office at a below cost price. In other words, they were voluntarily redistributing some of the revenue wealth from their wealthier patient to the less well-off patients. That's how the private market worked. Now, let me give one example that's a little bit more modern, but is going to seem strange. And I'm going to start this by saying something that perhaps sounds strange and I hope amusing. I want my dog's health insurance. Now, what the hell does that mean? My dog, I have a Royal Standard Poodle, Fritzy, named after Friedrich von Hayek. He's our 70-pound baby who sleeps with us. But we have health insurance. We've had health insurance for our other dogs, in fact. I pay a monthly premium. I choose to pay a little bit more, but not an outrageous price, so the deductibles are virtually non-existent. But they cover everything that is an emergency. And I do the paperwork. The vet signs off on the treatment done. They fax or email attach the form to the dog health insurance company, and promptly within 5 to 10 business days, I receive reimbursements for the amount that I paid out above my very modest deductible. Now, one time when I was still living in Michigan, I get this letter from this doggy health insurance company. I'm not going to mention the name. I don't know if that would be proper. But I get this letter from them, and they say, due to circumstances, we are making a change in your monthly premiums. I'm thinking, oh, God, they're raising my premiums for my dog's health insurance. Because of cost efficiencies and competitive circumstances, we're lowering your monthly premium with no change in benefits and services. Now, imagine that's how people health insurance was. You had wide choice, minimally regulated, if regulated at all, because I have no idea if they regulate the doggy insurance industry. There must be some minimal ones, but it's certainly not like what human health insurance is regulated like, okay? And your premiums go down because of cost inefficiencies and market competition. Now, if my dog can get that, surely you and I can. Now, the final point on this, slightly changing gears to an earlier point that both of us was making, and that's the issue that, do you believe that it is right or wrong to use coercion with your fellow human being when it does not involve acts of self-defense? I was recently in an exchange with an old friend on a Facebook strand about a related issue of whether something was the role and duty of the government, and was it wise and judicious to do this. And at one point in the exchange, Jacob, I said that we must accept the fact that for government to introduce or extend or reform this type of government program, we are taking for granted that the individual's life and his peacefully and honestly earned income is not his, that the state has the authority to co-opt and control a part of his own life and the fruits of his own labor, and that we are also accepting the fact that if a person were to resist paying such taxes to fund these activities, that to say that it is the role of the government to do this, and if the government is to have the fiscal means to do so, then we're saying that that government has the right to confiscate, arrest, imprison, or if resistance is made by the individual under certain stipulated legal circumstances, use lethal force, right, to subdue the individual resisting the confiscation of his wealth and property. Do you believe that it is right that to pay for Johnny's dental appointment, another person's life and freedom may be threatened because he is reluctant to hand over that which he has honestly earned to the state to be redistributed in this fashion? Now, the problem is that my friend, in this friend, I've known him for decades, basically said, well, I'm not a libertarian. I think the government has this responsibility. Well, that is another problem, Jacob. And that is that there are some people who do not consider it wrong to seize the wealth of some. If they were to resist, for them to be faced arrest and imprisonment. And people have been arrested and imprisoned for failure to pay their taxes. This is not just a hypothetical. And we do know that there have been some instances when people have resisted sending their children to government schools. And admittedly, it's few and far between cases, but it has happened when the police have killed a parent and taken the children into the government's custody because the parent refused to send them to public schools under compulsory attendance laws. Now that means that you're basically saying the state has the right to imprison you or kill you for failure to obey their edicts when it does not involve your infringement of another person's right, but to redistribute your wealth or to impose its indoctrination on your children. This is a profoundly important point, Jacob. Do you own yourself? Can the state enslave you or threaten your life so Johnny can have his dental appointment? And if you say yes, what makes Johnny's teeth and his dental appointment of greater value than your liberty and the keeping of that income or wealth that you've earned honestly in your free exchanges with others that have mutually benefited you and the other transactor? That is the fundamental philosophical issue, in my opinion. And until they can give an answer to explain why Jacob Hornberger's life is worth less than Johnny's dental appointment, if Jacob Hornberger resists the confiscation of his wealth to subsidize that dental appointment, then I cannot understand how they can justify at the most ethical, philosophical level what they want to do. But that is the question that they have to be challenged with and hammered away at them. Because unless they can answer that, then they are just thugs and thieves and murderers determined to take your wealth for their purposes that they consider better than the way you want to spend that which you've honestly earned yourself.
Yeah, let me return to the case on the charity that you were talking about. You know, here in Virginia, we have a situation. Well, across the country, dentists, as you know, do not have a Medicare or Medicaid program. That you go to the dentist and you pay for your own dental care, or you have dental insurance. Yet my dentist, Richard, got together with other dentists and devoted it 1 day a week on a rotating basis, providing free dental care for the poor. And that's exactly what would happen with respect to health care. They don't do it now because you've got Medicaid and there's that cynicism that develops when you've got these socialist programs. But that, in fact, was the case back before Medicare and Medicaid were brought into existence. I've mentioned before that in my hometown of Laredo, Texas, which was extremely poor, doctors' offices were filled with poor people that they knew could not pay their bill. and yet I never heard of one instance where a doctor turned away a patient. And the charitable hospitals that you're talking about, we had a hospital for most of my growing up that was Catholic, and later a for-profit hospital developed in competition. But for the needs of the poor, that Mercy Hospital provided people with services for decades. And then you make the moral case, and that's, to me, the most powerful case. It's simply wrong to use government to take what doesn't belong to you in order to feather your own nest. But I think it's also important to emphasize the utilitarian case. And here's what I've been emphasizing to conservatives for 7 years. This is an important, critically important thing for conservatives to listen to. Nothing you will do to reform the healthcare system, no matter whether you repeal Obamacare or replace Obamacare, it won't make any difference. You're wasting your time. Those of you that donate your money to conservative think tanks and foundations who are promoting some kind of healthcare reform plan, you're wasting your money. You're better off going to the golf course and spending it on the driving ranges or whatever, membership fees in the country club, because nothing you will do will make the system work. Nothing. No healthcare reform will make the system work. It is doomed to failure. It is doomed to chaos. It is doomed to crisis. It's what Ludwig von Mises called planned chaos. And that's because as long as you leave Medicare and Medicaid and occupational licensure and insurance regulation and government involvement in healthcare in place, you will have a crisis. Anything you do to try to reform it will inevitably just make it worse. There's only one solution to this program, and unless you're willing to adopt that solution, you're just wasting your time and your money. And that solution is the one that Richard and I are talking about, a free market in healthcare. The repeal of these government programs, these interferences, and a total free market healthcare system where people are free to keep everything they earn and decide for themselves how to dispose of their wealth, including healthcare expenses.
Yes, this goes back to the fundamental issue of what is the nature of a free society. I think the fact that we have these discussions today, and even those who we often think of as our political or even philosophic allies among the particularly more economically conservative cousins of ours, if I can put it that way, the fact that this is an issue that has to be raised just shows how far we have gone down the collectivist path and how far back we now have to retrace our steps to basically liberate the society and move it in the right direction to have an even freer society than the Founding Fathers had imagined. It is not impossible, and it can be done, but two arguments have to be combined, as you were just saying. The ethical, philosophical argument about what is the nature of the right of the individual to his own life, which a limited government is meant to secure, and the pragmatic argument is that what system is most likely to provide that which individuals need in the best quality at the most reasonable cost. And that, of course, is the unregulated free market. Those two issues have to have their renaissance, even more than has been the case in some circles. Because unless that battle is won, we will just continue down the same path. And whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, there will be an inescapable crisis that cannot be solved with a Band-Aid, as they keep trying to do this. And if I can use another metaphor, to kick the problem down the road by just doing something that seems to be a patchwork. Because unless that is faced, there will come a real crisis in which a huge number of people will face serious economic hardship because the smoke and mirror tricks don't play out anymore.
All right. On that note, Richard, we're out of time, and for more information on these areas, come and visit us at fff.org, where we archive all the previous issues of the Libertarian Angle. Richard, enjoyed the conversation. Look forward to talking to you next week.
Till next time, thank you for joining us as the viewers and listeners.
Yep, we'll see you next week.